I have attorney and author and speaker Don Brown with us right now. Some of our listeners have suggested we just call it the Don and Donna Show.
That would be quite an honor for me, Donna.
That would be an honor for me.
I'd be hitching my wagon to a star. So there you go.
No, it's the other way around. Absolutely. Boy, that hurricane was something. And I just wanted to, all of my Charlotte, North Carolina friends, I've talked to a number of them, and talking to you just now, where you basically had power outages, a little inconvenience, but not near what Asheville got.
Right. Donna, I had published an op-ed in Saturday's American Thinker. I'd encourage all your viewers to go read it. It's called The Democrats' War on Western North Carolina. American Thinker, Don Brown, The Democrats' War on Western North Carolina. And, and as I was pointing out in the op-ed, a degree or 2 or 3 clicks to the east, and Charlotte, with 2.5 million residents in this metro area, would have been wiped out. 2 or 3 clicks to the west, and Greenville and Anderson. Greenville got a lot anyway, but I mean, the whole brunt would have, still by the grace of God, where the storm goes to it, and who winds up in the epicenter and right at the ground zero. And the problem with the mountains, as we point out, is that when you get into the mountain regions of North Carolina and West Virginia and Tennessee and Virginia and northern Georgia and northern Alabama, first off, those are the places that folks typically run to or retreat to when hurricane comes, because hurricanes traditionally hit coastal areas. Yeah. And I grew up in eastern North Carolina in down near the Outer Banks, and I'm very used to having hurricane scares, because the Outer Banks traditionally have been hit harder than anybody because the way they extend into the water. But for mountainous areas, it's so fluky in many ways, because what happens is when these torrential rains come in from a monster storm like this, and I think it's going to be worse than Katrina before it's over. In the mountain areas, these rivers like the Shenandoah River there at Asheville flood really very, very quickly. And understand that most people are living down in the valleys between the mountainous peaks. And when these rivers begin to overflow into creeks and streams, they overflow into people's houses and homes. That's the first thing. So people wind up drowning or getting flooded very, very, very quickly. And then on top of that, you have mudslides and rock slides that coming down on top of them. And it's been a disaster like we've probably never seen here in North Carolina. I've been told about Hurricane Feazzell back in the 1950s. That's before your time and my time. That hit mostly in the east and all through Raleigh. Hurricane Hugo hit Charlotte pretty hard in '89, but it was nothing. Charlotte was down for about 3 weeks, but nothing like this. And Hugo was, again, another fluke storm that came straight up from Charleston. This hit on the west in the panhandle of Florida and shot straight up through Georgia and into the mountains where you would not expect it to go. The federal response has been beyond despicable from everything we've heard. You read, some Democrat tried to send me an article from PBS, from UNC TV, trying to say that the reports of federal non-responsiveness are disinformation. Like I'm going to believe something from this.
Yeah, I'm going to believe that.
UNC TV is part of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which is federally funded. It may as well be MSNBC or CBS, but the reports that we're hearing on the ground are absolutely devastating. And so for my fellow North Carolinians, we continue to ask for the prayers and support of all your listeners all across the country. And I know that you've lived here also, Donna. And the problem is we've got another one coming in now, Milton, about to hit Florida. And those folks, we have to pray for those and be ready. It looks like DeSantis is doing a much better job than the Democrat governor of North Carolina did here in preparing for that storm. They're used to it. But my concern is a week from now, 2 weeks from now, people will forget about what happened to Asheville and Lake Lure, and Boone and all these mountain towns, many of them that have been washed out and some even destroyed. And of course, then you get into the question, how's this going to affect the election? And I raised the question, in my op-ed, of the 25 western counties declared a disaster, 25 of them, North Carolina has 100 counties, the 25 most mountainous counties are traditionally the most Republican counties. North Carolina has voted Republican in every presidential election. Let me put it this way. In the 14 presidential elections beginning in 1968, North Carolina has voted Republican in 12 of those 14. The only time it went blue was with Jimmy Carter in 76. Everybody's intrigued by him. And then Obama in 2008, everybody thought, oh, here we have the first opportunity for the first black president, blah, 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 blah. Obama was a disaster, but I never thought I'd say there's been more of a disaster than him, and the current fools in the White House fall in that category. But I'm concerned that the lack of federal response and the slowness in mobilizing the military to get on the ground and get in the air and bring help to these people is a calculated decision by this Democrat administration. And we have people that are dying because of it.
Absolutely. And, on social media, you'll hear extremes both ways, on the right and the left. You don't know what to believe, but I'll tell you something I know firsthand. I attend the Cowboy Church, American Fellowship of Cowboy Churches, and I just love it. They're such real people, and they're so giving. Any disaster, whatever happens, it doesn't matter where it is. They pack up chuck wagons, and they gather food, water, whatever. They're always there, just like Samaritan's Purse. Always there. So Philip Gilliland, who is over the American Fellowship of Cowboy Churches, sent a text to me. He was very upset because Monday they get to Tennessee. And so water was being confiscated, not just the Cowboy Church, but other churches around were coming and gathering food and canned goods, water, whatever, to help the people who are in crisis. But FEMA was confiscating all of this, which made absolutely no sense whatsoever. What's your suggestion on that?
First off, one of the reasons that John Kerry says the First Amendment is a problem, and they want to talk about ministry of disinformation, is because who are you going to believe? CNN, MSNBC, or people on the ground who are actually experiencing and now have the ability to broadcast directly from their phones. There have been, listen, I always, try to verify and corroborate, but there have been multiple reports of FEMA confiscating water and trying to confiscate supplies and directing supplies. And there's an ex-Special Forces guy who came on the other day and said that FEMA was saying you can't get your vehicles up there. And he said one redneck from the mountains is worth 150 bureaucrat with PhDs from DC. And they were saying, watch me. It's just amazing what a guy from the mountains with a chainsaw and a pickup truck can get done. They were just, you have citizens on the ground finally just ignoring that. FEMA, they need to, this is an organization that, in my opinion, needs to be on a chopping block, along with the DOJ, the IRS, the EPA, and a bunch of other organizations have gotten too bloated and too expensive, excuse me. And the reports we are hearing on the ground is that the federal response, up until we started finally getting military in toward the end of the week, which should have happened on day 1, not day 8. Aside from the military response we've gotten in, we look at FEMA and some of the other agencies, they just gotten in the way. And I'd say let's just, I read, Mayorkas comes out and says he's got no more money yet. We had a whistleblower showing that FEMA has $4 billion in the account that's not being spent. Then you have, the White House press secretary, Ms. Pierre, in 2022 saying that they can access FEMA emergency funds for illegals. And then in 2024 say, no, we don't have any money. We don't take FEMA money for illegals. You can look at her just lying, saying contradictory things over a period of 2 years. But you're right. Your folks on the ground saw it, Donna, from trying to get stuff in, and FEMA trying to block the road, trying to confiscate the supplies, and they seem to be getting in the way. And they may as well just stay in D.C. We've got a lot of great patriots in the western part of the state. I wish the Democrat governor of North Carolina had half the courage and determination and financial sense and business sense as the governor of Florida, who's Republican Ron DeSantis. But the state and federal response, other than belated military response, has been worthless. Has gotten in the way. What should happen, Don? I believe, and as I ran for Congress, I think we should develop a division of the military to respond immediately to disaster relief within the United States for these types of storms. Here's what should have happened. On the day after the storm, Biden should have mobilized large swaths of the 82nd and 101st Airborne to get in there with Chinook helicopters, start dropping in supplies, dropping in medical supplies, dropping in water, dropping in blankets, dropping in food, and at the same time picking people up who needed to be picked up. That should have happened immediately. And the delay by this fool in the White House and his fool assistant who's supposed to be whispering in his ear in the Situation Room, who now has taken the Democrat nomination, has cost lives. We got to get better, and we have to understand that you have the resources to throw hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions into places like Ukraine, and you let Americans die and forget about them because your response is quick enough. And the only thing you do is send some bureaucrats in that wouldn't know how to pull somebody up on a lifeline if it hit him in the face is inexcusable. So we're very concerned about lives that are still. I'm still seeing reports that folks are not even getting drinking water. Some things have picked up. Some of the roads have been cleared now. But you talked about Asheville. If you go to Revolver News, there's about a 30-minute video that a couple put together talking about the truth of what happened in Asheville. And it's up right now, and I was just watching it, and it's worth watching. And bear in mind that Asheville, in some ways, as bad as it was there because the Shenandoah River was there, its infrastructure is still there. But you look at places like Lake Lure, they're smaller towns totally wiped out. And that's not a takeaway from the disaster that happened to Asheville also. But I'd encourage folks to go to Revolver News, I think it's revolvernews.net, and look at that 30-minute video, what really happened in Asheville, or the nightmare in Asheville, something like that. And it just has been posted within the last day or so. It is really eye-opening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of things are eye-opening to me. And I wanted to mention this too, and this is about the what happened. When I went to grammar school, okay, so I was in the sixth grade. No, it was the fourth grade, Miss Anderson, and we were talking about hurricanes and tornadoes, and one of the kids in class just threw up his hand and said, "What's the difference between a hurricane and a tornado?" And this is her response to it. And it always made total sense to me. She said, well, a tornado can just bounce around all over the place. It gets its velocity actually from the ground. Okay, so a hurricane is a little different there, where it starts out in the ocean, starts out in the water, it's gathering water, and it takes it and disperses it on the earth wherever it lands. And generally speaking, the coastal areas are going to get the brunt of any hurricane. So, and it stuck with me, and it totally makes sense. So my question is this. So, I mean, I'm not a meteorologist or anything like that. I'm going by common sense in what I was taught in school. So, which is not being taught anymore, by the way. So anyway, you take the hurricane and it goes up through Georgia. And of course, we know Atlanta got some damage, but I'm talking about, it seemed like it gained strength instead of losing it as it's going up into the earth. I mean, what's the accountability of that? It just doesn't make sense. And the eye, by the way, didn't lose its effectiveness.
It does seem to be the case. And, I can't fully explain it. People said, well, are the feds tinkering with the weather? I can't say for sure. I do know, as we discussed offline, the Department of Defense has had this HARP program, HARP, going on for, 3 or 4 decades. And there have been active attempts to experiment and manipulate with the weather, manipulate these weather patterns. But something was very, very odd about this particular storm, because it did seem to gain its strength. Now, you mentioned Atlanta, and as I mentioned earlier, had this thing tacked about 3 degrees to the east. It could have and would have hit Charlotte. But the thing about it is, although there are a lot more people in a larger metropolitan area at the same time, it's flatter here. It's not Charlotte isn't entirely flat. You've lived here. The area is a little rolly, but when you get into a situation where you have crevices and ravines and valleys, there's no place to go, no place to run, no place to hide. And as I pointed out in my op-ed, these are salt of the earth people to give the shirt off your back. Hundreds of little Baptist and Methodist churches up there. Some of the sweetest people, they are very, very self-reliant, but they're some of the finest people in the country. And for them to have to get hit with this, however it happened, is just beyond. It's just a tragic, heart-wrenching story.
It is, and then boots on the ground. Also, we're talking about the everyday people who live there, and how they care for each other. And I don't know. The whole thing makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. If not for the good people of the churches who are coming up there and dropping off water and just the basics that people can live with, they wouldn't be surviving. And I'm fearing when they uncover everything, how many people will be lost.
Well, and bodies are still continuing to roll up into the rivers and just appear here and appear there. And, again, I've got friends that are up there, and I've talked to a lot of them, and the eyewitness accounts are what you can believe. You really can't believe any type of media production, especially if it's a left-wing media production, because they're going to try to make the administration look as good as possible in its response. But you can't really put too much lipstick on a pig. The more you put on the pig, the worse it looks. But listen to the people. Pay attention to the eyewitnesses' accounts. They're the ones who are living through it and are telling the truth. And these photos are not doctored or made up. They're the real thing. They're being tweeted out and put on social media as soon as they're being shot. And that's where the real story is for the people who are on the ground.
Well, what's been said is before the election, something is going to happen in October. Could this be the thing they were talking about?
The response, again, going back to my op-ed, the Democrats' war on Western North Carolina, the response, and I point this out, nothing that Democrats do or fail to do is without political calculus. And I pointed out in that op-ed that in 1957, I believe it was, President Eisenhower sent elements of the 101st Airborne in to integrate a high school in Arkansas. In 1961, JFK sent troops in to integrate the University of Mississippi. And in 1948, Harry S. Truman initiated the Berlin airlift, to take food and supplies and everything that's needed to the city of Berlin that was being surrounded by the Soviets at the time. And I'm asked the questions, are the lives of Germans in West Berlin worth more than the lives of North Carolinians or the lives of Americans? Are the lives of illegal aliens who've come into the country and gotten debit cards where they can go out and swipe for thousands of dollars, who are being put in hotels in New York City without being paid a dime? It's very, very clear that this government, this Democrat government, and these deep state operatives are far more concerned about the lives of non-Americans than Americans. Mm-hmm. And so, to your question on whether or not this is an October surprise, I won't go so far as to say the government can create a hurricane out of the blue, but I will say that the poor federal response and not getting the military into an area that only the military could have served and could have brought immediate relief to within the first 48 hours. It's a calculated decision. Biden is the commander in chief. All he had to do was call up Lloyd Austin and say, I want the 82nd Airborne and 101st Airborne with all the choppers you've got to bring in supplies, drop them everywhere and get people up and get them out. And, you stop and think about it. That would have been a very decisive move, but they opted not to do that. And she brags about all the money they're giving to the people of Lebanon right in the middle, meaning Kamala.
That's a slap in the face.
Whatever, 150 million, whatever the amount was they're having for relief for Lebanon, right in the middle of this deadly storm, is a slap in the face, as you say. Mm-hmm. It shows the height of insensitivity to American citizens, to American families who've lost their lives and everything they have, to brag about money we're giving to another country when we can't even effectively respond. Now, listen, I understand, as I say, within the last few days, we've gotten some military choppers in there belatedly. I was at a Republican event in Charlotte Thursday morning and spoke to Dave Bullock, who is our nominee for the North Carolina auditor. And he was telling me that he had just been in Asheville Airport the day before that. It's Wednesday. Now, remember, we're still days and days after the storm hit, and that he had been told by the National Guard that at that point, 10 Chinook helicopters had been approved to come up from Fort Bragg the next day. In other words, nearly a week after the storm hit, they're bringing in helicopters, but it should have been the next morning. And a lot of times in these situations, with these natural disasters, the first 48 hours are the crucial difference between life and death. And everything after that, or a lot of what happens after that, are mop-up operations. Mm-hmm. And the Democrats and Biden and Harris and those in charge of the military, namely Biden, who's the commander in chief, at least on paper, they've got that on their hands. They got it on their hands.
Certainly do. Right. And Don, let's pretend, okay, you've just lost everything you have. You just lost your home. You've lost every single thing. But the government gives you a check for $750. How far is that $750 going to, especially with the insanity of everything costing so much more now than it did 4 years ago?
Well, the advice I would give anybody, I would give anybody in that situation is declare yourself to be Ukrainian, or declare yourself to be an illegal alien. Then you get more. They give you free housing, free everything else. Because as American citizens, we're on the low end of the totem pole with this globalist one world order government and deep state philosophy that's running Washington and running New York. If there's ever been an exclamation mark with a punctuation under it on how little they value American lives versus Ukrainian lives and Lebanese lives and illegal alien lives, it has been this storm the way it's hit the mountains of Western North Carolina, northern South Carolina, and Georgia.
I don't know how you could possibly be in the middle on who you're going to vote for at this point. I just don't get it.
Well, if you really think and you really love the country and love the Constitution, nobody would vote for her. But you've got people that don't, or don't even understand what they're doing or thinking. It's a good thing for the Democrats. The Democrats are hoping these storm-ravaged victims in the western part of the state won't be able to vote because they will be destroyed. I think they're hoping that the voting apparatus and mechanisms won't be up, and the people just won't go because they're so demoralized. You're trying to find food and water. The last thing you're thinking about is going to the polls, and it appears that the Democrats are counting on this very thing.
Another thing is this possible? Could they try to put the election off another couple of months or so because of this? Pretending they're really hoping and caring for the people in Asheville, North Carolina.
There's nothing that they might try to do that would surprise me at all.
They can't do that, can they?
The states have set the states have set the election for November the 5th, I guess it is, and you can't do that unless you change the law. So but that didn't stop them from moving deadlines around this sort of thing before. Yeah. But I think that if you're the Democrats, that's the last thing you really want to do, because that gives people the opportunity to rebound and to actually get in there and vote. And remember the extremely poor federal response where you have FEMA just getting in the way, and you're looking for retaliation if that happens. Why would the Democrats want to do it? Well, if they think they're losing right now, they would want to buy more time and look for more opportunity to see chaos. I don't see the election day moving. I think what the other side is banking on is that the voting infrastructure within the western part of the state. Listen, if you take the solid Republican vote from the 25 mountain counties of North Carolina away, I just told you earlier that of the last 14 elections in North Carolina, 12 presidential elections out of 14 beginning in 1968 have gone Republican. If you take the mountain counties out, or if you neuter them, or if you remove 25% of that Republican vote from those counties, probably most of those elections will swing Democrat. So they're hitting in the very area of the state that has been the most solidly Republican, without a close second over the years. And so I think that the Democrats would not want to extend the election deadlines, because then it gives those folks an opportunity to regroup and vote, and I don't think they really want that.
But then again, nothing else they do makes sense to me whatsoever anyway. I try to analyze it, and I want to, and this is what you do in the business world. Okay, this is business, Donna, here. Okay, this is this side of me. So you want to know what your competition is doing. You want to know so that you can know how to analyze what they're doing and why, and then you can go back and offer the opposite, of what they're doing. I can't make any sense out of anything they do.
Well, there's nothing. If you're looking at the paradigm that they will be operating under, that is something that will be the best for the United States and preservation of the Constitution, nothing they do makes any sense.
No.
But if you look at it from the paradigm that they want to undermine and destroy the Constitution and move to what George Bush 41 called a new world order, then then chaos is what makes sense to them, because you create chaos creates confusion. Confusion creates an opportunity to come in and initiate a power grab. And every time there's a power grab, more and more your freedoms are removed. We lost a bunch of them after 9/11. They never come back. We lost some at COVID. And every opportunity for a crisis is an opportunity to chip away at the constitutional underpinnings of this nation. And that's what they want.
So can this disaster be a way? You just led me to the next question. So could this disaster be a way to inhibit martial law? I mean, martial law. I mean, is this what this is leading up to?
Well, I mean, it could be a component of it. Certainly could be a component. I mean, they could theoretically initiate martial law. Not that martial law is constitutional. I'm not saying that it is, but they could have. There could be an excuse to use it in those mountain counties because, there's a lot of looting going on. I heard multiple personal reports of people calling me, telling me, hey, they're looting up here. If you come up here, make sure you're armed. Well, I'm going to be armed anyway, but that would be a possibility. Of course, we don't know what's going to happen with this next storm. Milton's about to come in, and so there could be a combination of factors, but it certainly could be a factor. I don't think this storm in and of itself would give them enough cover to credibly try to initiate martial law all over the country, but it certainly could be. Again, all they need to do is pick off a few swing states to preserve power. Remember, we've talked about this before. Everything they do is calculated to preserve power. And they're going to do whatever they can do to preserve power, and the lack of response is one means for doing that. Now, Trump apparently is so far ahead in Florida. We hope and pray that our friends down in Florida who are about to face Milton fare better than our fellow North Carolinians here in the mountains. But Trump, I read, is 13 to 16% ahead in Florida. It's going to be hard to pick Florida off. It will be a little less challenging to pick off North Carolina if you can, and Georgia also, if you can disrupt the voting infrastructure in the heart of red country. So I think they're strategically, Donna, looking, I don't think martial law is the first objective. I think that's something they would have in their back pocket. I think their first objective is to preserve power, and their poor response and lack of response, and even obstructionist tactics in certain instances, by all accounts on the ground, is in Western North Carolina, is a way of doing that.
Something, you can't argue the fact of Trump's popularity. You just can't do it. Trump has already been to, and you won't hear this on the liberal media, by the way, but you're going to hear it here and a few other places. He's already brought a bunch of water, had all of this stuff brought to those people. He has already done more not being president than anybody else on the current administration team has done, including FEMA.
That's right. And his new special relationship with Elon Musk has arranged for the Starlink drops there in the western part of the state. Right. It's not Biden or Harris that arranged for that. It was Trump working with Elon Musk that arranged for that. As far as his popularity goes, he returned back to Butler, Pennsylvania, and crowd estimates I saw were at 105,000. So you're correct. There's never been another politician in our lifetime that can command those types of crowds. Not even Reagan. Nobody commands those type of crowds. So there's great, great passion for what Trump stands for, and that's the return to American greatness, where the Constitution rules and where there's a smaller, more responsive federal government that actually puts Americans first and not foreigners and illegals first.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that happened last week, I spoke with John Merrill, former Alabama Secretary of State, and John and I are really good friends. So he's on the show once a month. And of course, you can only be Secretary of State 2 terms. So he is working now with a private company. I think he would be a great cabinet member for Trump along with you. I think both of you would be ideal.
I'm not sure I get past the Senate with some of the stuff I've been involved in.
I think you'd fit right in. I think it'd be great. So he was at the Alabama game, Alabama-Georgia game. And by the way, Alabama pulled out a surprise and they won the Georgia and uprooted Georgia.
And then lost to Vandy, so go figure. But anyway, go
what the world is wrong with them? I mean, so John was there. And because he and Trump are friends, he was in the press box with him. But he said it was a little nervous because Trump wanted to walk out on the field and say hi to everybody. Now, you would have to be in an Alabama game to know what I'm talking about. They are loud. The minute people get there, the fans are just loud and boisterous. You can't even hear yourself think. So this is before the game. So Trump walks out into the field, and he said, I thought it was already loud enough. He said, you should have heard the crowd. They love Trump.
Right.
He said, I'm sure there had to be some liberals in there, but he said the fans, they outran the liberals out there on the field. And I said, well, were you a little nervous about him walking out on the field like that? And he said, no. He said, what you couldn't see in the video, he said, he's got a great team of people around him protecting him. He said they were all over the place. And I said, well, they had to be a little nervous with Trump walking out on the field because any lunatic could have been up in the crowd pretending to be watching the Alabama game and could have shot him easily, couldn't they? And he said, you would have to see the apparatus of this whole thing. And then he said, once they got into the press box is already awesome. Okay, I don't say anybody can get into the press box, but they also had another layer. It was an outer layer of protection for Trump just for that special event.
Well, I'm sure that thunderous response to the president was from both the Bama fans and the Georgia fans. In fact, you mentioned that the president had John Merrill with him. He also said had Herschel Walker with him. Herschel was in his Georgia shirt. So there are things that Alabama and Georgia football fans can certainly come together on. And this is one for sure.